You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to episode 140 of the podcast. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne, all three of us back with you for this, and we're going to return to our division rankings. We're getting set to talk about the Central Division before the start of the NHL regular season in a couple of weeks. Guys, how we doing?
Doing really good, Harp. Back from vacation. It was awesome. Like, we went to Vancouver, spent the week there. It was a lot of fun. Got to do so much. Usually on these trips, I'm a little worried that I'm going to feel like I got enough done, but I felt so accomplished with everything we did and everything we saw. And it's hard to come back from BC. Like, if I could copy and paste my friends and family to BC, I would move there tomorrow.
Yeah, damn, that sounds like fun, dude. I've always been told, before I settle down in Toronto and start the rest of my life here, that I have to go and live in Vancouver for at least a month, just because, it's just different, and I've never done it. So maybe I'll take that advice one day and do it, because I've never been. I would love to go. I had a fantastic weekend, boys. I don't know if you guys saw my Instagram stories and whatnot, but my nephew Maverick came and visited because it was Brooke's birthday, so I got to see him all weekend. He's 10 months old. We got to take him to his first Maple Leafs game in Toronto, a preseason game against Ottawa. The Leafs ended up losing, but it was fun to go, and thanks to Ryan. Shout out to Ryan for the tickets there. Ryan McLaughlin, great tickets, great seats. So that was super fun to go to. Also, on the same day, before the game, I actually met Michael Bunting. I told you guys about this, so I'll tell you kind of how it happened. It was so weird. We were at the Distillery District. It was myself along with my friend Ty, his new fiance Christina, and some friends there of the eventual wedding party. We were taking some engagement photos essentially at the Distillery District. We see this guy walk by, and he has a great deep emerald suit on, but he's across the parking lot, and we couldn't really see who he was or whatever, but we saw him walking around before and didn't think anything of it, except for that suit is great. So he walks back, but this time on our side of the sidewalk with his girlfriend. And one of my buddies stops him and is like, "Hey man, we all commented on the color of your suit. That's a great deep forest green color. What do you call it? Or what does the guy call it at the store?" And he was essentially like, "Oh, I don't know. I just asked the guy for a green suit and this is what he gave me. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it too." And his girlfriend said something like, "Yeah, it's a great color, whatever." And then as they kind of start to walk away, I wasn't really paying attention to that conversation, and nobody else noticed that it was Michael Bunting, probably because they're not diehard crazy Leaf fans like me. But as him and his girlfriend were starting to walk away, and as they turned, I noticed, I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure that was Michael Bunting. And then as they're walking away, my friend Ty is like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "I'm pretty sure." And then Ty he yells at him, he goes, "Hey, Michael!" And then he turns around and he's like, "You're Michael Bunting, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am." So then now that we got confirmation that it was, I yelled at him. I was like, "Are you playing tonight?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am." Because this was at 3:00 and the game was at 7. And just preseason, right? So I guess players are able to do whatever the hell they want. And he's like, "Yeah, I am." So I'm like, "I'll see you there." And then he took off. So I regret not getting a photo with the guy. But just the way it happened, it was so quick, and because it was a conversation that happened on the side and we weren't really paying attention to who the guy actually was, I probably should have yelled and been like, "Hey, can I get a picture?" But I also didn't want to be that guy to distract him from his day,
Was it seniors night where you were? Is that why Michael Bunting was there?
Yeah, that's the first thing Casey said when I told the guys that I ran into Michael Bunting. He's like, "Tell him he should retire because he's too old for hockey now." But it was cool. Then we got to go see him play the game, and he got into a bit of a scrum, and I think he had an apple and he was all over the ice. So it was kind of cool, that I had seen him just hours prior to that. So overall, really fun weekend.
Out of context, that comment makes no sense to people. So I'm just going to mention
Sure.
He's way too old to be in the conversation for the Calder. We've had this argument a million times. That's why I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Good clarification.
For sure. No, it's always cool, whether it's a star player or, just a guy that and recognize and watch on TV playing hockey, for whether it's your favorite team or for someone else. It's always cool to recognize them and run into them out in public, for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to see him during his time in Toronto, because after this year, he's probably going to get a hefty pay raise, and most likely it's not going to be in Toronto. So I'm glad I got to meet him before he disappears to Arizona or wherever again.
I was just going to say he'll get a big deal in Arizona after this year, and he'll be going back.
7 times 7 or something.
Yeah, exactly. I had a good weekend too, guys. Case, you mentioned you had a great time out in BC, and I have the bug, man. Like, I want to go back out there, since I was out there a couple of years ago for a wedding. I wasn't in Vancouver, but I was in Revelstoke for a wedding, and it's just beautiful, man, with the mountains and everything. It's awesome. Chad, glad you had a great weekend as well. And I spent some time in Ottawa. Ironically enough, the team that Toronto played twice in a couple of preseason games over the weekend. So I was there, got to see a Red Blacks game on Saturday night. So that was fun, even though the Red Blacks got pumped. And yeah. And then the day after, we had Sens Fan Fest at the Canadian Tire Center. So that was a lot of fun. Bumped into a few people from Brockville that came down for it that are Sens fans. And that was really great. So yeah, it was a good weekend for me as well.
They would have went up for it. Ottawa's north of Brockville. But anyway, just saying.
Oh, what did I say? Did I say it came down for it?
No, I'm just making sure.
Yeah, went up top. Yeah, no, you're right.
You're so petty, Jack.
I'm just bugging him.
No, thank you. My geography skills are a little icky. Anyway,
huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring the podcast. SeatGeek is a ticket app that takes all the confusion out of buying tickets. SeatGeek makes it extremely simple to buy tickets to all of your favorite sporting events, including Jays and Leafs games, and you can always find a great deal. On SeatGeek, all tickets are scored on a scale between 0 and 10, so you know if you're getting a good or a bad deal. Green is good and red is bad. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. So click the link in the description to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek. Summer is here, and you know what that means. Extreme sports like spikeball and road hockey have returned, and so is day drinking. The problem is we're not as young as we used to be, and these summer activities can be draining on our bodies. When you push your body hard or just feel run down, it's extremely important to stay hydrated. When you make hydration a priority, it helps you feel healthier on a day-to-day basis. Enter Liquid IV. Whether you're playing sports or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. One stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. It contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients, non-GMO, and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. The kicker? This stuff tastes good too, guys. Liquid IV has incredible hydration flavors like watermelon, strawberry, pina colada, and more, but my personal favorite is lemon lime. So get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth in all caps at checkout. So that's 25% off anything when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth, all caps at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today at liquidiv.com. Shout out to Cocktail Bomb Shop for sponsoring the podcast. Cocktail Bomb Shop is a Canadian woman-owned small business, and all of their cocktail bombs are proudly handmade in Montreal. Well, what is it and how does it work? Step 1, you pick your favorite flavor of cocktail bomb and unwrap it. My favorite is definitely mojito. Step 2, drop your cocktail bomb into 8 ounces of sparkling water and watch it fizz for 5 minutes. Step 3, add a shot of your favorite alcohol, some ice, and enjoy. Fellas, gents, boyfriends of the world, these cocktail bombs make the perfect gift for your lady friend because not only are they tasty, but they're Instagrammable as well. Right now, if you go to cocktailbombshop.ca and use the code BITV15, you can get 15% off your entire order. That's cocktailbombshop.ca. Use the code BITV15 at checkout for 15% off.
All right, let's get into it, boys. So, return to our division rankings. We've got 3 divisions left to do, and we're going to talk about the Central Division. So we'll go 1 through 8, and let's see if we have around the same projections for the standings in this division. So I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to you guys or to our listeners, but for me at least, I've got the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche, at the top of this division. Obviously, there were some changes to the roster this offseason. Darcy Kemper gone. He's now in Washington. Nazem Kadri is now with the Calgary Flames. Those are the 2 probably biggest changes that happened to this roster. But, you know, they brought in Evan Rodriguez. They brought in Anton Bleed, I think, as another depth forward, and Alexander Gorgiev to be the other goaltender with Pavel Francouz. So I don't really see this team taking a step back. I think they're going to be in it again to try and go for back-to-back Stanley Cups. They just locked up Nathan MacKinnon, highest paid player in the NHL now by just a bit, just over Connor McDavid now at 12.6. So that's good.
Petty. That had to be
so intentional.
Like $100K more. So cheap.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't see this team taking a step back. So I've got the Avalanche in first spot in this division. Thoughts?
I put them here too. Harp, I'm with you. It wasn't as easy as I wanted it to be. I kind of contemplated them not being here. I do think they're going to take a little step back this season. I don't think they're going to win the West. But that being said, I do still have them in the first. And that's mostly because of the superstars on this team. They're game changers. There's multiple of them, too. McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog. That first D pair is so good. Makar and Taves. Like, Makar is being talked about as being one of the best, if not the best player in the league now. It's like, yeah, thank you very much. But, Chad, if you came in here with just a ripping argument to put these guys second, I wouldn't even blink. I'd be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, Case, you're not going to hear that from me because, like, I still think this team is so good. I think they got a little bit worse, on account of some of the subtractions they've had to their lineup. Losing Kadri as their second line center, that's not nothing. He had an incredible year last year, and now when you look down the depth chart, they've got guys who can fill that position like Alex Newhook or JT Compher, but they don't really have a bona fide second line center, like someone who you look around the league and you're like, that guy could be a second line center on every team, So that's the one thing that really stood out to me. I do like the Evan Rodriguez ad. I'll say that. I think that was a sneaky good ad because on an offensively minded team like Colorado, and if Erod is able to play top 6 minutes, like that guy could have a career year, So
he did last year, so it would have to be a pretty good year to be a career year 2 times in a row.
I know, but the thing
I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying last year was a great year for him. So
it was.
If he can be that much better, then that will be huge for this team.
Yeah, and the thing with him too is that he got off to a really great start last year while the Penguins had some injuries and he was playing more minutes and more, more meaningful minutes with better players. And then as the Penguins kind of got healthy, he was pushed down the depth chart. So now if you look at Evan Rodriguez on this team and you kind of slot him into top 6 minutes playing with, some of the best players in the NHL, arguably, you could do some damage. And if you get some power play time too, I could see another career year coming for him this season. On D as well, first of all, I didn't preface this, but this is kind of how I like to do it if this is your first time listening to, one of these standings predictions, whatever you want to call it. I like to go through forwards, defense, goalie, and say if they got better or worse. So we've established for Colorado losing those key guys up front, including Burakovsky. I don't know if we mentioned Burakovsky, but
no, we didn't. Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
So losing him as well, like I think it's clear that their forwards got a bit worse. They're going to need guys to kind of take that next step and improve. You know, guys who they acquired at the deadline, like Lehkonen, is going to have to play a more prominent role now on this team. So their forward group, I think, got a bit worse. Not really overly concerned, though. I think they'll score by committee still, and they still have game breakers. Their D, pretty much the exact same, although I think they're even better now that Bowen Byram is a year older, and, you know, Cale Makar, I don't know if you can say he can get better because he's already the best defenseman in the league, but yeah, like their D, no concerns there. And then in net, I think they're the exact same position as they were last season. Like Kemper, you know, you might look at him and think, okay, maybe he's more of a bona fide starter than either Francouz or Georgiev, because Georgiev struggled last year. But like Kemper was not great in the playoffs, and they still won the cup. They were still the second best team in the regular season too. So I don't think goaltending is going to make or break this team, and I think their tandem is just fine, especially because I really liked Francouz last season. So overall, I don't see them taking much of a step back, but 119 points again, that's a bit tough to replicate for any team at any time, you know? Yeah. Thoughts on that spiel?
I think they're taking a step back in goaltending. In my opinion, I think Kemper doesn't get enough credit.
He was good in this regular season.
He wasn't great in the playoffs. That's fair. We're not talking about the playoffs right now. We're talking about the regular season where they're going to rank. And I don't know if a 1B, 1C, I'm going to call this. I don't think anyone says that, but I don't think it's going to be as good as Darcy Kemper.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Georgiev did have a tough season last year, and you need him to bounce back if goaltending isn't going to be an issue. It sounds like he's going to be the starter, to be honest. It seems like that's why they brought him in.
Did you see his comment in the press conference? They asked him what it was like trying to change or get used to a new system with a new team, and he goes, "I stopped the pucks."
Yeah, I saw that. Just classic.
Classic goalie from Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have a little bit of a concern with the goaltending. I actually think that Francouz ends up being the starter. I know you're kind of looking at it like Georgiev is going to be that guy. He's younger and kind of, you know, the one to, you know, be ready to step into that opportunity. But there's some question marks there. Obviously, he had a really tough year last year and just hasn't been the same over the last year and a half. But I mean, they're just such a powerhouse up front. Kemper was good, but he wasn't world beater good. And because he had such a great team in front of him. So it's a little bit of a concern, but not a huge one.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So at number 2, and honestly, this is where it might get a little dicey. Like we were saying off air, like number 1, Colorado, I think, you know, predicted that you guys would be picking the defending Stanley Cup champs to be at the top of this division as well. And then we know who's going to be at the bottom in 7 and 8, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But, you know, the rest of it sort of in that middle is where it was tough. But I've got the St. Louis Blues, the 2019 Stanley Cup champions in the number 2 spot. I think they're really deep up front. They just locked up Thomas and Kyrou on long-term deals, and they are in extension talks early on here with Ryan O'Reilly as well, who still, even in his early 30s, is one of the best two-way forwards in the game. Pavel Buchnevich was a huge ad last season. I know that they lost David Perron, and you know, he was a big part of that team, but I don't think it's a major loss. They've got some young guys that can step in there, like a Jake Neighbors maybe in a depth forward role and that sort of thing. And not too many concerns on the back end as well. Justin Falk had a big year last year. There's obviously Parayko, who's a monster. The only concern I really have is the goaltending. what kind of Jordan Binnington are we going to get? He kind of struggled through the regular season. It was Ville Husso's net, and now he's the guy again, and Thomas Greiss is behind him. But Binnington did play well in the playoffs, so we'll see what we get there. But I think this is a very deep hockey team still, and I think that their window to contend is still very much open, and I've got them in the number 2 spot in this division. What do you guys think?
I think I could put them anywhere from 2 to 4. If I look at this team, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of things to like, and then there's some things that you just never know what's going to happen with them. Like, for example, the back end. Justin Falk had a monster year last year. A year before that, 2 years before that, not very good considering his contract. There's also a question about some other guys on the back end, like Nick Leddy and Bertuzzo. I don't know what type of player they really are anymore. Same as the goaltending. Binnington, he was a backup goalie a year ago. Now he's going to be looked at to play starting role again, and I still don't know what to think about him. That means I love the top 6. Love this team's top 6 so much. There's a lot of goals being scored here, and good center core as well. So I like them a lot, but I don't have them at second. So Chad, I'd like to hear what you have to say about them before I put my rank.
Okay, I also don't have them at number 2. In case, I liked what you said, where like when you said that you can see them finishing anywhere between 2 and 4, because that's kind of how I feel too. I feel like after the 4th spot, that's kind of where I draw the line in terms of like my tier rankings here. But I've got St. Louis at 3, and that's not because I don't think they're a great team, but I think they are pretty good, but they didn't really improve much, and they finished 3rd last year in this division with 109 points, which is pretty good. That's that was good enough for 9th in the NHL. I think they're going to be pretty much right around that spot. I do have some question marks though about their goaltending, like you guys mentioned. What kind of Binnington are we going to get this year? Not having a guy like Ville Husso to kind of carry the team in the crease all season, because we know just how good he was all year, basically until the playoffs where Binnington took over. But as we mentioned already, we're not really talking about the playoffs right now. We're talking about ranking the teams and where they'll finish in the regular season. So goaltending is definitely a bit of a concern. Their backup position, got a bit worse with, they added Thomas Greiss. We'll see what kind of goalie he is this year. He had a couple tough years in Detroit, but he was good in Long Island before that. So, it's the same question for Binnington. It's like, what kind of Greiss are we going to get this year? In terms of their forward depth, like, losing Perron sucks. I really liked Perron, and he didn't get that much money in Detroit. And like, I thought he was going to get more, to be honest. And I do really like Perron. He was a good fantasy player for me last season, but I don't think it's that difficult for them to lose Perron and still be a competitive offensive team, because they had 9 guys who had over 20 goals last year. Like, I don't think it really matters that much, despite the fact that I like the player a lot. They're going to be looking for guys like Jake Neighbors to step up, and this will be his first regular season with the team, so we'll see what he can do. But the 3 spot for me feels a lot more comfortable than the 2 spot, just because there are a couple other teams that I would consider for number 2 as well. So I'm going St. Louis 3.
I have them at 3 as well. And Chad, you're right. They need all the guys up front to score 20-ish goals, because really this back end sounds stupid to say, but these defensemen play defense. I'm not really expecting any of them except Krug to jump in and be a point producer. Falk did last year, but I'm not expecting it every year. Preco, we thought we were going to have that maybe a few years ago, kind of died down, but he's a good defenseman. So is Leddy, so is Bertuzzo, Scandella, Mikla. So they're all good defensemen. So they're not adding in to the scoring. But what I will say is it does make me feel a little better about the them protecting the goaltenders and that voodoo that's going on there. So that's what made me comfortable in putting them 3 and not 4.
Yeah, and just to touch on their back end too, I hated the Leddy deal, by the way. but he kind of fits this team perfectly. Like, I think they paid him too much, but I think he does fit what St. Louis is trying to do.
He also had like 129 playoff games played before the age of like 27.
Yeah, like that's not nothing. Like, that's impressive in its own right. But, you know, maybe they don't sign him. They're able to keep Perron. They make the money work that way. But, you know, it kind of goes to their identity. And we know what this team is all about. They're built for the playoffs. Like, we know this. And once they get in, like, they could go on a run for sure, especially if they're able to add at the trade deadline. But Case, I totally agree with what you said on the back end, that like they don't really have a lot of guys who contribute offensively aside from Krug and you know, Falk in the past. We'll see what he's like this year. They have a lot of guys who can make a good first pass, but a lot of their defensemen aren't very mobile. So you're going to be looking to, you know, third line scoring players to really carry that, you know, because you're not going to be getting, you know, offensive points from your D-men. No. That's for sure.
They're a hard back end to play against. Like, even Krug, for being an undersized defenseman, throws his weight around pretty well.
Yeah. So we have St. Louis, then, you and I, Case, at number 3, and Harp had them at 2. So
I think we're going to disagree about number 2 still, me and you.
Sorry, Harp. Who do you have at 2 then, Case? Who do you have at 2?
2, I'm trying to help you out here because I know you like a little clickbait. You know, the second one will shock you.
Yeah, I know who you're going to say.
This was my audible, my last second audible I said, and I put Nashville at number 2.
I knew it.
Man, I love that team. The more I stared at the screen, the more I looked at their depth chart, the more I was like, why do I like this team so much? So I don't know if you want me to go ahead and start talking about Nashville, or if you want to say your number 2. I can do it here. It's up to you.
Well, Okay, maybe we'll do this. How about Harper? Tell us who you have at the 3 spot then, to see if it makes sense here.
So I have Nashville in the 3rd spot. I'm with Case. I think they had a nice little offseason, adding some key pieces. They added Nino Niederreiter really late, and then added Ryan McDonough for next to nothing to an already ridiculous back end. They've got UC Saros, who could go out and win the Vezina Trophy this upcoming season. Pekka Rinne, who just got hired by the organization, by the way. He said that Saros is the backbone of this team, and I truly believe that they don't win if he's not in net. And the only question that I have with this team is if Johansson and Duchesne can keep producing and keep living up to those contracts. Not expecting Duchesne to go out and score 40 goals like he did last year. I'm not so much concerned with him. It's more with Johansson, in my opinion, just production-wise. But I like this forward group. Another year for Tanner Jeannot, another year for Tomasino and Tolvanen and some of these guys. I like the Predators, man. And those 2 key adds, again, I'll go back to that. Niederreiter up front, he fits in really well with that forward group, I think. And then adding McDonough to a back end that already has Yossi, Ekholm, Fabro, Carrier. It's ridiculous. So I've got Nashville at 3, but I'm willing to move them up to 2 because I really like what they've done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That backbone comment. I say in these rankings, I don't like putting too much weight in goaltending anymore because it's absolute voodoo. But where I do like putting weight on it is when they have a superstar goaltender that I can absolutely lock in, and that's Saros. So I feel really good about him. And then when you have one of the best decors playing in front of him, like I absolutely love this McDonough ad. And he's not the guy he used to be. We know that. We recognize that. But playing him with an Ekholm or a Fabro, like, that's a great pairing. And then whatever one you don't pick is going to play with Yossi. Thank you very much. Lazone and Carrier, like that third pairing. So I really like all defensive aspects of this team, including a very hard to play against third line in Trennan and Genois and Sissons. Like, that's fantastic. I loved watching Trennan last year. That guy was ruthless, just flying into corners, and like I feel like he was bloody every time I watched the Nashville Predators play. He's just a wrecking ball. So that's a lot of fun. And then the top 6. Duchene and Johansson, even if they take a little step back, I still think this is a good top 6 to compete in this division, especially with Josi freaking dishing pucks to these guys. Really like this team. We got Philip Forsberg into full form here. He's loving life. Great contract now. There's a lot to like about this team, and I think that they're the second best team in this division after staring at this depth chart for a while.
Okay, so you guys have Nashville at 2, Case, and you have them at 3, Harp. I have Nashville in the 4th spot, and like
I know you do.
We kind of, we talked about how between 2 and 4 it's kind of a toss up. So let me say what I have on Nashville, and then we can finalize the 1 through 4 rankings and mention the other team that we haven't yet that I would assume we all have as our 4th of the top 4, and that's Minnesota. I'm just going out on a limb here. If it's different, we can talk about it, but I'm just going out on a limb here. So Nashville, I do really like the team, and I originally had them in 3rd spot, but then I bumped up St. Louis, and I already mentioned that I thought Minnesota was going to take a step back in last episode, actually, when I was arguing that Kirill Kaprizov could win the Hart Trophy. But like, I just look at these 3 teams, and I think they're all so close, but this is the ranking that I decided on. So, and this is my rationale for Nashville being in the 4th spot as opposed to 2nd or 3rd. I think they just have too many candidates for regression. I think you look at that full first line, you look at Forsberg, Duchene, and Johansson. They all had incredible seasons last year, but who knows if that continues. Like, we haven't seen Duchene or Johansson be that good in a long time. We knew it was there, especially with Duchene, but we haven't seen him put it all together in a while until last season. And I just don't know if that's sustainable. I'd have to look at the underlying numbers for that to get a clearer picture of it. But those 3 guys up front, for sure, for me, are prime regression candidates. And then on the back end, Roman Josi almost had 100 points last season. And I know he's extremely good and has been for a while, but almost 100 points for a guy last season, even if it is Josi, kind of surprised a lot of people. The fact that he was outscoring defensemen like Makar and Hedman and John Carlson and other guys like that, it was a bit shocking. I know he's really good, but to me, I don't think he sniffs even, in and around 100 points this year, because I just think, if you look at his career, this is the first time he's been absolutely unbelievable number 1 scoring defenseman by a long shot in the NHL. So that's another candidate. And then in net, like, you guys know how much I love UC Saros. I think he had an incredible year last year, and he's been really good, like within the top 5 to 10 goalies in terms of my favorite stat, goals saved above expected, for the last 3 or 4 years. But the problem is, and Harp, you said this, verbatim, if he's not in the net, they don't win. So I think that's a problem right there. Even though I don't mind, their new backup situation, you've got Kevin Lankinen in, and then you've got Big Save Dave Riddick out, and Connor Ingram, as a third still, and that's okay. I think their backup position actually got better, but I just don't think that you can rely on UC Saros to be an absolute game breaker again, because even if he takes a slight step back and he is closer towards average but still above average, I don't think they win as many games as they do last year, and I don't think they come out of this division with almost 100 points like they had last year. So that's my argument. I'm willing to move them up because I still really love this team's depth, and they could prove me wrong this year. A lot of things could go right for the team. They could finish second in the division. And I'm willing to put them there if you guys, truly think that. But that's just my spiel on Nashville at number 4.
The thing with regression, and when we're talking about these players in particular, is I think that the only thing that's going to happen here is they're going to get brought back to the mean. Yeah. And these guys have all been very good in the past and had a couple bad seasons. We're not talking about, when you brought up progression in the past, you bring up maybe like Verhaeghe is the first one that comes to my mind. He came out of nowhere, had some unbelievable seasons. Regression is expected. With these guys, they've been good. Duchene's been a superstar. Johansson's been a very solid first line center. Forsberg has the skill. I'm not going to say there's a huge history of Forsberg. He's always been good. He hasn't been great. He's been good. But where I see regression happening with these guys is it just brings them back a little bit to the mean where these guys should be. And Duchesne should be better than the last couple years before last year. Johansson should be better than he was the last 2 years before last year. So I think, it's in Johansson or Josi. He's always been a superstar. So yeah, 100 points, probably not obtainable again, but it's just going to bring him back a baby step. So I'm really not worried about regression as much as you might be. And UC Saros, frig, I'll play him 68 games. We'll have a good chance of winning 68 games.
Yeah. Yeah, and fair enough. Like I did say, I really love this team. I love their depth. I don't even think we've mentioned a guy like Cody Glass in their bottom six, but he'll be there. He'll be doing some work there in the bottom six, and then guys like Tomasino and whatever. They've got a ton of players, and Jeannot came on the scene last year and had an incredible year after being.
Jeannot was good. That's a fantasy player for you, too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, in a banger league like ours, he's a fantasy player that you need because he makes something happen.
He hits, he scores.
Yeah, but again, that's another guy who knows what he's going to do this year. I compare a guy like Jeannot to a guy like Michael Bunting, but in less favorable circumstances, because they're both a bit older. They kind of came out of nowhere, had 60 points, and who knows what they're going to do this year. The difference is Bunting is going to play with the second best player on the planet, and Jeannot is going to play on the third line Nashville Predators. So I don't know. I think a lot of players are probably going to regress. I just don't know if it's going to be so much that they're going to be worse than what they were last year. Does that make sense? I think they're still going to be pretty good, and they're going to be a playoff team, and I'm excited to watch them. I'm hesitant to put them above third or fourth, but I'm willing to move them for the sake of argument here. So is that what we want to do? We do Nashville number 2, St. Louis number 3, because Casey and I agreed on St. Louis, and then move on to the number 4 spot?
Works for me.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's my exact ranking. I'm not going to argue it.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. I had the same issue you did, Case. It was hard for me to have Nashville down at 3. I really like the team, and if Duchesne and Johansson can each go out and have at least 50 points each, I think that's very reasonable for a prediction from those two. And just as long as the forward depth is there, which I think it is, and some young players, like we mentioned, taking a next step, like a Tomasino, a Tolvanen, Jeannot produces again, I think they'll be fine. And then on the back end, it's looking good, like it always has. So
I'll predict Duchesne having more than 60 points.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
More than 60 points, but
I could see it for sure. He is a talented player and always has been. All right, so I'm good with that. So we've got Nashville in 2, St. Louis in 3, and the next team we're going to touch on obviously is the Minnesota Wild. And I know that there are some question marks and that they're going to take a step back because of the cap situation that they're in with the Parise and Suter buyouts. They lost Cam Talbot this offseason. They lost Kevin Fiala. That was the biggest one, him going to the LA Kings, but this is still a very good hockey team. I think you had some players there like Ryan Hartman, for example, who just came out of nowhere, had a huge year. Talk about a regression candidate right there, and Ryan Hartman, in my opinion. But a lot of good players coming into this lineup on really good value contracts, on cheap entry-level deals. You've got Matthew Boldy, who was just a stud when he first came in and actually helped Kevin Fiala's production last season. Marco Rossi, expected to be on this team. Even a guy like Sam Steele, who they signed for just over $800K, I think, and is still a young forward and just needed a change of scenery. I think that could be really good as well. And they still have a solid back end. It's still all the same guys there. They re-upped with Jacob Middleton, who fit in really well there. John Merrill early on in the season. And Fleury and Gustafsson isn't a bad tandem at all. So I think Minnesota still going to be a good hockey team, still going to be a playoff team. And like we were saying with St. Louis, if they can just get in, that's all that matters. They could go on a big run. They've got the superstar winger and Kaprizov, obviously, as well. But I've got Minnesota just down a little bit in that fourth spot. Still like this team, just think there's going to be a slight step back, but I think they're going to have some guys on some cheap contracts that are going to really help them out during this kind of tough spot that they're in with the Parise and Suter buyout. So I've got Minnesota in fourth. Just a thought on the Wild.
Yeah, kind of agree with you on most parts there, Harp. Definitely think that there's a little step back to be happened here. The thing that maybe scared me off of putting them at number 3 was I expect there to be some growing pains from October to December, and then this team's going to be really good in the later half of the year. I say growing pains because, like you said, maybe Boldy and Rossi and Sam Steele on a new team. Tyson Jost really only played since the trade deadline. Like, there's a lot of new faces in this forward core that I think it's going to take a little working out in the first couple months, and those are important points when it comes to playoffs and where you rank at the end of the year. I don't like the D-core as much as I have in the past. I think it's pretty simple for me to say that compared to what they've had before. And I expect this is the year we start seeing Flower decline. So I still think this team is good, and I still think they're a playoff team, and then anything can happen in there because they crash and bang. I just think that the growing pains early in the season, the lack of a real number 1C, a slightly worse D-core, and the decline of Flower all puts me at 4 for them.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. I don't think Fleury is like that great in the first place, and he's only getting older, so he's only bound to decline. So I agree with that. I also agree with Hartman likely going to regress because that season came out of nowhere last year too. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Harp. Losing Fiala, I mentioned that last episode in our hot takes episode, and I said, that's actually a good thing for Kirill Kaprizov if he can still put up the same numbers without his running mate and Kevin Fiala. That helps his case for the Hart Trophy, especially if he wills them into second or third in the division and they have a really good year. But I don't disagree with really the arguments that you guys are saying here about Minnesota being in the 4 spot. I originally had them in 2, but I guess I'm conceding here and they'll go down to the 4 spot. The only thing that maybe I'm a bit higher than you guys on for this team are the younger players who are coming in. Like Matthew Boldy, when he played last year, I think he had like I'd have to look at it. I don't have it in front of me. I think he had like 35 points in over like 45 games or something, and like it wouldn't shock me if he was just shy of a point per game this year if he plays with Kirill Kaprizov.
Totally forgot that he played that many games.
Yeah.
I thought he only played like 15 or something like that for some reason, but maybe I was thinking about how many goals he had, which was 15.
Yeah.
I'm like not disagreeing about the young players on this team. Yeah. I think they're all very good. I'm just saying it's going to like the first 2 months, it's going to be some important points dropped. Was my point there.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And then a guy like Marco Rossi, like we haven't seen as much of him in the NHL. Like I don't think he's played over 10 games, right? Like he still has they didn't burn a year of his ELC, right? Because he was hurt, and so he still has a lot to prove. But I know that he is a fantastic prospect for this team, and he's hoping to make the team out of camp and go from there and see what happens. So I think there's going to be some sneaky good players on this team. And then of course, like their third line with, guys like Marcus Foligno and Joel Eriksson Ek is always good. And their depth there is good. They're hard to play against. They're fast. They hit. So like, I think they're going to be good. I think they are going to take a slight step back. And I don't think that's really a bad thing because they had an incredible year last year with 113 points, finishing 5th in the NHL. So I think to match that would be tough. And even in the second spot where I originally had them, I still don't think they would be getting 113 points just because I think this division is weak. Like you mentioned off air before we began, Harp, that this might be the weakest division now in the NHL. It might have overtaken the Pacific as the worst division.
Yeah, exactly. Chad, you mentioned Joel Eriksson-Ek. Wouldn't he be their number one center coming into this season?
I think it'd probably be Ryan Hartman.
He's in preseason and camp. He has not been playing with Kaprizov and Zuccarello.
Yeah, because I think what they want from him is a defensive role. Like I don't think they expect much. So and
that's a good point as well. Like he could be you could pick him as a dark horse for the Selke. Like he is a very good two-way center. Doesn't put up a ton of points. So yeah, that makes sense. But I look at him as a guy who could be their number one center. Just because, we were talking about Hartman regressing, but we'll see how it shakes out.
For team fit, I don't think it makes sense.
I think he probably will be eventually.
Yeah.
Like, I think he might be their best center, but for different reasons than, what you need a guy, or than what you need in a guy to play with Kaprizov for,
Right.
Well, I mean, fair, but possession matters so much with players like Kaprizov, and he can win some face-offs.
True.
So I think you start him in the offensive zone a lot with those guys.
Yeah, and that's probably the case, and you'll see him on special teams as well to get possession and whatnot. But if you look at 5-on-5, like I'm sure his D zone starts are just crazy because that's what he does. He wins faceoffs and he plays solid defensively. But one thing I really didn't touch on was the goaltending on this team. I just think it's really funny that last season Cam Talbot was an all-star, right? And he had a great year. Pretty good year up until the All-Star break, and then he kind of regressed a bit. And the year before that, Marc-Andre Fleury won the Vezina. And we're not really talking about either of these guys because I don't think it would make that much of a difference. Like, goaltending is so weird, and I just don't know what to think of this tandem, to be honest. Like, it could be really good, it could be really bad, it could be average, and I really don't know. So I'm looking forward actually to kind of seeing how that shakes out and to see if they made the right decision, because Cam Talbot is going to be playing a heck of a lot of games in Ottawa, and we'll see which guy does better and if they made the right choice.
I just can't wait to see this. A little off topic, I know, but I just can't wait to see the way the Wild look in like 3 or 4 years, just with all of the prospects that they've been able to put into their system. Like, they're a competitive team right now, a playoff team. This will be a slight step back, like we've talked about. But man, like Billy Guerin has done a good job of stocking the cupboards at the same time. Another 2 first-rounders this year. We mentioned the goaltending. Jesper Wallstedt coming up. He's playing preseason games. So anyway, just kind of a side note, this team's going to look pretty good, I think, in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, the problem is you're not going to be able to sign anyone because they've got $14 million against the cap of dead money for the next decade.
Paying 2 guys playing on different teams $14 million.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're paying that to Parise, and in the meantime, he's making league minimum or whatever it is playing on the island.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough. Anyway, so that's Minnesota. So there's our top 4, and we'll get into the bottom half of this division now. So this is like 5 and 6. I think they can be flip-flopped in my opinion. It can go either way. But this next team that I'm going to talk about, who I have in the 5th spot, and again, it was tough. I kind of went back and forth, but I do think they're a good team on paper, and they,
I know who you're talking
Story
about.
of their lives.
They, things got a little stale last season, and everything just kind of went wrong. But I could see this team bouncing back, and I do think the new head coach is going to have a big impact on their success and them being able to bounce back this season. And obviously, I'm talking about the Winnipeg Jets. So I have them in this 5th spot. Not a lot of changes. The roster didn't change too much, which is surprising. I know that there were conversations about moving on from Blake Wheeler, who just had the captaincy stripped away from him, obviously. And, he seems to be embracing it, which is good. And no surprise that while we're still in this kind of flat cap era, recovering from COVID, that no team wanted any part of taking on his $8.25 million contract. And also Winnipeg wasn't willing to retain salary in a trade. So he remains a Winnipeg Jet. And I just think there were a lot of guys that just had down years last year. Nikolai Ehlers, who got hurt. Mark Scheifele, who can be one of the best two-way centers in the game. They've got one of the best goal scorers in Kyle Connor. And Connor Hellebuck is still a very good goaltender. And Rick Bowness, the thing with him is that he's a really good communicator. He's a player's coach. And I think a guy like that who has a lot of experience could be really good for that team. He obviously stepped into a tough situation in Dallas when Jim Montgomery got let go. And he was really good for the guys there. And I think that, things have been tough these last couple of years in Winnipeg. I think Bowness could be really good for them and help them turn it around. They'll be playing meaningful games all year, but I just don't have enough in them to put them into a playoff spot. But I think they're going to be competitive and they'll be better than last year. So a thought on the Jets.
Yeah, not that I'm blaming this on Paul Maurice by any means, but this was a locker room divided for a long time. And hopefully Rick can come in and fix that. But there's still drama with this team. And it's like, I feel like it just has such an impact on them. Like captaincy stripped. Pierre-Luc Dubois is probably leaving next year and was supposed to be leaving this year. Like when you have guys talking about leaving all the time, it's just so shitty on team morale. And then your captain's stripped. And there was arguments between Laine and them before. It's like, God, guys, like you're making millions of dollars to play a professional sport. Let's just fucking play. Weird team, this one. Always looks good on paper, not always that good. They also have one right winger signed to the NHL and AHL currently. So I guess Blake Wheeler is playing right wing and then everyone else are centers maybe. Yeah, it's a really weird team. I don't know. I don't have much else to say. I don't really love the back end, but I don't hate it. The top 6 is great, but they aren't producing like they're supposed to. I don't know. Weird team. Don't know where to rank them. Can rank them 5 or 6. I don't really care.
Yeah. I mean, I've got them in the 5 spot. It is a very weird team. Sorry?
So do I.
Oh, okay. So we've all got them at number 5 then. It is a very weird team. The problem with Winnipeg for so long has been that they have so many good individual pieces, but they can't come together as a team to win games. And Harp, I said I disagree when you said that Scheifele was one of the best two-way players in the game. No, he's not, dude. That guy does not play defense. He sucks at defense. Him and Blake Wheeler are the two biggest players on this team in terms of, how much they get paid and their aura around the team. Like, this is their team still. Neither of those guys play a shred of defense. It's insane. Like, if you watch a Winnipeg Jets game, it's shockingly bad. Those two guys for sure. And like, I noticed this last year when they were playing against the Maple Leafs, and I wasn't the only one. Like I listened to Steve Dangle talk about this exact same thing on his podcast last week, and he was like, man, these two players do not play any defense, and the data backs that up as well. Like, they're terrible. So I wholeheartedly disagree that Scheifele is a two-way player. He's not. I think he's selfish, and I think Wheeler is too. And I think if they don't make the playoffs this year, they should have a wholesale on this team and just sell every player you can, because it's not working. Like, this core, you've had it together forever now, and you've added to it, and you've built around it, and you have a Vezina caliber goalie, and they can't win shit. Like, it makes no sense. Like, either work together as a team, make the playoffs, and make an impact and have a good season, or fire everybody and sell the whole farm. Like, it's brutal.
I would probably hold on to, like, maybe Kyle Connor and Perfetti.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that
and then, like, Ehlers, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Kyle Connor can score 50 goals, which he probably will this year, wouldn't shock me. If he scored 50 goals, and Ehlers can be over a point per game, and you've got Perfetti coming up, who can you can have the same kind of production in the future, like, and you still can't win a playoff round, even with those guys. And I didn't even mention the big two on your team, and your Vezina caliber goalie, and your back end that's pretty solid, offensively and defensively. Like, it makes no sense, guys. Like, I think we're realizing now that, you know, guys like Trouba, guys like Laine, et cetera, weren't the problem. It's this core. It doesn't work. So if it doesn't work again this year, like, this should be their last dance. They're all or nothing. Like, this should be the year, because they've been mediocre for so damn
Amazon
long. Yeah.
Hear that, Amazon? Get in there.
Yeah.
Actually, Boys in the Booth have been commissioned to do it this year. I'm going to film it on my iPhone. But no, this team is terrible, guys. But that being said, I think they have so many good individual pieces under a new coach and with a new leadership group in their dressing room. Maybe they're able to get it together and push for a playoff spot. And that's why I have them at number 5. They just have too much talent to suck this much.
No, it's been frustrating to watch the Jets the last few years. I wasn't expecting that take on Mark Scheifele. I didn't even realize. I thought big center. I thought he was a pretty good two-way forward. But anyway, if the data is there to back it up, then there you go. And I have not been a fan of Blake Wheeler for a long time. I have to tell you, I think that he's just got too big of a personality, and is just, I think he's very demanding of others more than himself, and has talked about before how he has to be a better leader, a better father, like all this kind of stuff. In an interview that he did with Sarah Orlesky with TSN, I don't know if you guys remember seeing that, but yeah, clearly there's still something there with these guys. And I agree, like, if they're not going to make any headway and be a playoff team like Kevin Cheveldayoff says they are expected to be this year, then I think you look towards the future. And this draft that they just had, those 2 first-round picks, I think definitely helped. So if they can go out and be competitive this season, or if they stink and don't produce and underachieve like they've been doing, then they should be set up well. I do like the 2 picks that they got in McGroarty and Lambert in that first round. So it's going to be really interesting to see if this team can turn around. I did hear something just from Elliot Friedman talking about the Jets not too long ago, that even Dustin Byfuglien and that whole situation and him leaving that locker room, I think, had a big impact on that core as well. They've had a lot of big names go, and I mean, there's, clearly there are some issues there with this core. So anyway, moving on to the 6th spot, and I think we're all in agreement here that it's the Dallas Stars in that spot for us. Obviously, the big question mark going into this regular season is, where's the money for Jason Robertson, and what does that deal look like? I think it's going to be a bridge deal. They're not able to commit to him long term, because if they were going to, they would have to do some cap gymnastics, that's for sure. And that number over a 7-8 year deal, I think, would be bigger than the 8-year deals that we saw for Thomas, Kyrou, and Stützle, for example. Robertson has been just a better producer, flat out. He had 41 goals last season. So he's such a huge part of that team. And obviously Pavelski and Hintz to round out, like the top three that is in that forward group. I'm really concerned about the depth in this forward group. And on the back end, a little bit, there's some aging guys back there. Besides Miro Heiskanen, who's fantastic, there are some aging guys back there. And then what are we going to get with this goalie tandem of Jake Ottinger, who I think is really good, but when he's off, can Scott Wedgwood be that full-time backup? So anyway, Dallas in 6. What do we think?
It's amazing that this team's goaltending can go from Ben Bishop, Ottinger, and Hudobin to Ottinger, John Gillies, and Scott Wedgwood. Scott Wedgwood and John Gillies were like the
Devils
third goalie for the Devils 2 years ago. Like, it's amazing how the mighty have fallen. I'll work backwards this time because I just talked on the goalies. Yeah, what are we going to get from Ottinger? I like him. The D, there's like 2 defensemen I like on this team. That's it. The rest of them kind of aging and unpredictable. And then what type of Sagan, Ben, Marshman are we going to get this season? I add Marshman in there because that's a guy candidate for regression, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. 4.5 times 4 for him this offseason.
That's insane. Before they got Robertson done, they did that.
That's the thing, is this team, management's ready for the handing of the torch from Ben and Sagan to, Robertson, Heiskanen, but they're not ready to hand the torch with some cash. It's like, get Robertson signed, please. He's like one of the best players in the league now all of a sudden, and you're not going to give him any money. Stop talking bridge deal with this guy. Just get him done.
Yeah, legit. Something I forgot to mention about Winnipeg, by the way, just going back a little bit, is that their backup is Big Save Dave, who was borderline unplayable last year. So if Hellebuck's not in the net, like, I don't know what the hell's going to happen there. For Dallas, though, I like Ottinger. He had an incredible playoff. Like, we were talking that, he could be in the Conn Smythe conversation if he got Dallas to advance in the playoffs. So, like, that's how good he was, guys. Like, he was the only reason they were in that series. But we've never seen him play a full season. So, how many times have we seen that? An incredible young goalie. The thing is, usually they're not young. We usually see incredible goalies who have been around for a while. They get their one shot and they're really, really good. And then the next season, they kind of falter a bit. It is a bit different with Ottinger because he's young and he's been a developing prospect for a while. So we'll see what he does in a full season. But God, that's a bit of a tough tandem.
Also, I want to correct the John Gillies comment. I said John Gillies because I got all confused with Scott Wedgwood and Arizona and the New Jersey Devils and John Gillies. All of that melding.
Yeah. Gillies is in
Arizona.
Back up in Arizona. Yeah, that's
that
right.
Was my confusion. I was
like, oh God.
Yeah, that's no worries. Hey, Case, it's okay. The Devils had 8 goaltenders last season, so
yeah. Well, now we have a nice little situation going on.
Yeah, it's not bad.
And we'll get to that in a couple of weeks.
Sure. If they're healthy. If they're healthy, that's the thing.
Exactly.
Well, Jonathan Bernier isn't, but he's practicing with them.
That's good.
He's playing. He's in scrimmages. So, anyways, that's 2.
The last thing I'll say about Dallas, and we've talked about this before in Instagram DMs and just off air, but this team has a pretty solid prospect pool, in my opinion. Great. And so kind of like what I was saying with Minnesota, that, we predict them to take a little bit of a step back with the cap situation that they're in, but they've stocked the cupboards. And say what you want about Jim Nill not being willing to pay, or more of the owner, Tom Gagliardi or whatever it is, but not willing to pay Robertson right now. But they do have the cupboards stocked with guys like Johnston and Stankoven and those guys for the future. So, kind of just the same as we were saying about Minnesota. And Wedgwood was good with Dallas when he came over in a very short period of time. But
Wedgwood is good in the first 5 games he plays with every team he gets traded to, okay? Yeah. He gets Arizona their first win every single season.
Yeah. He had a great setup too, though, in Dallas. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this year. I always love it how it's like the backup / third string guys. Like, David Riddick always has great setups. And then like, a guy like Eddie Lack, for example. Remember him? He used to always have great setups, but he couldn't.
I think maybe they were third guys because you can see their pads so well.
Maybe that's the case. But last thing on Dallas here, just like I look at their back end and they're far worse without John Klingberg, no matter what you think of the player, whether he got overpaid, underpaid, whatever, whether they should have kept him or you think they made the right decision to let him go. They're still worse without him. You've got guys like Ryan Suter and Colin Miller playing in your top 4 every game. That's tough to have 2 of those guys in your top 4. Like we talked about how Suter is getting older, and so you're going to be looking to Heiskanen and Lindell really to carry the load on the back end. But I just don't love the team. They have no depth either, and they have a ton of guys who either were good and aren't anymore, or like were good last season, like Marchment, and like I expect to regress completely. So I don't love their setup, especially without Jason Robertson to kind of carry this team offensively. So we'll see. Maybe Dallas can surprise, but I think the 6th spot in this division makes a lot of sense for this team.
Yeah, there's a good chance, I think, that my hot take from last week about Jason Robertson is going to come true here, and that he could miss some regular season games due to this contract holdout. Because if that's a 7 or 8 year deal, that number is going to be massive because he's been a big producer already. Mentioning the back end as well, I think all the more reason for them to really see Thomas Harley take a step as a young player on a good value contract. So kind of a lot of comparables between Dallas and Minnesota, in my opinion, both in tough cap situations. By the way, Sagan's going to be the highest paid player in the league this year.
I meant to mention that.
$13 million. What the hell?
I meant to mention that. Clearly, that's just how his contract was structured.
Yeah.
But I saw that today too, and I thought that was hilarious. Making more than everybody. Like Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, like everybody. That's insane.
Yeah, it is. I'm not so much worried about him. If he can stay healthy, he can still be a contributor. But man, Jamie Benn at $9.5 million. No, thank you. Anyway, so moving on from the Dallas Stars, and these last 2 teams should be pretty quick, I would think.
Yeah, let's fly through this.
All right. Yeah. So at 7 and 8. So at 7, I've got the Arizona Coyotes. At 7.
I don't. I have Arizona. Arizona is an AHL team playing in an NCAA, and I have them last in this division.
The Mullet Arena. So obviously it'll be another year of the rebuild for these guys. Yeah.
Why is it called that? Did we ever get confirmation on that?
I don't know. But like, great name for a hockey arena. Like, just very ironic.
But like, why? Look, do they not even have a sponsor? Like, I don't like. Are you trying to make money and build a good team or not? Like, I don't get it. I don't get why this franchise is still in the NHL.
I don't get it either.
Jerseys.
Great. Oh my God. Great jerseys. But anyway, looking at this team, I think there will be some slight improvement, but they're going to be sellers at the deadline. I think like Chychrun's going to go at some point. He wants to go and wants to come back in and play well and get traded to a contender. Gostisbehere, he's going to be another attractive piece to move. The guy had 51 points last season big bounce back year for him. They could probably get a nice, some nice pieces for him at the deadline as well. But the core is there. Like, you're seeing who the core is on this team. I think there will be some slight improvement, but another rebuild year and another year to be in the draft lottery. So quick thought on the Coyotes, and then we'll get to the Chicago Blackhawks to wrap up.
I've already said it. They have 4 forwards who are solid NHL players, and 2.5 defensemen. That's about where I draw the line. 2 of their D pairings were the analytically 5th, like top 5 worst pairings in the league last year. Gostisbehere and Mayo, and the Swiss lad there, Moser, and Strawman, who's no longer there, were the other one that were just brutal. So now they're going to lose Chychrun too. They better get a heaping pile back for him. So sick about talking about it. I have to get that jab in there every time we bring it up.
Yeah.
And man, it's like this team's bad. And then goaltending was the only thing that really went well for them last year, other than maybe like Schmaltz having a great season and Keller. But goaltending I expect regression here, because it's Velmeka, he was not supposed to be that good last year. And now they have John Gillies, who I watched be the worst goalie last year. Drove me insane. But I don't have much else to say about this team. I think Chicago has a few players who can steal games, and that's why I have them higher.
I agree. I've got Chicago in the 7th spot, Arizona in 8. Case, I have to correct you a little bit, because although Vejmelka was flashy and interesting, that he had some good games last year, analytically by the end of the year he was one of the worst goalies in the league.
Yeah, it was like he stole some. He was bad most games, and then he would steal some ridiculous wins from like Colorado and the best teams in the league.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I should correct myself on that. He came up with some big wins and was good early on.
Yes.
But definitely fizzled out.
While playing that many games with a team in front of you that looks like that's got to be exhausting. So like anybody in the net there isn't going to have a fantastic year. So Arizona then will agree on the 7th spot, or sorry, in the 8th spot. That leaves Chicago for number 7. They still have game breakers like Patrick Kane, who's going to get traded at the deadline. And Jonathan Taves is still okay. And they've got, they brought in Max Domi and whoever
Every
else.
player on this team is an NHL player.
Yeah.
That's why I have them higher than the Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, and I'll say this about Chychrun too before we get off Arizona for too long. He could be an Ottawa Senator right now, but Sens management doesn't want to give up Shane Pinto. That's a joke.
That's right.
That's a joke. Get him. Like, come on. Anyway, sorry, Case, to interrupt you about Chicago.
It's just they have NHL hockey players on their team.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. They're trying to solve the Seth Jones analytics problem, that he's not very good on defense with putting a absolute giant kid beside him. So that might work out. I don't know.
Is that Alex Vlasic you're talking about,
yeah,
Case?
6'6".
Yeah.
Like 190 pounds.
Yeah.
So,
but like
he's
still
a shutdown defender. He's a defensive defenseman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He can shut down
Yeah.
some guys. So maybe it's good to play him with Seth Jones. But like, I really don't love the D-core here at all.
No.
The goaltending's just as scary, and then forwards, it's like kind of last chance you here. All of a sudden, like a lot of guys getting their like last shot at the NHL.
Legit.
I like that.
Or playing on this team to try to, play meaningful minutes up front and try to put up points so that you can be flipped at the deadline to a contender.
Exactly.
Like a Max Domi or
Max Domi, Blackwell, Johnson, Andreas Athanasiou. All those guys are like licking their chops at the trade deadline.
Yeah. And I'll say this about Chicago too before we wrap up. I'm glad that they finally have committed to a rebuild. I think trading Kirby Dach was kind of the first step, because he wasn't really working there, and they saw that they could take advantage of the deep draft last year, or the most recent draft, and they did it. So, good for them. I'm glad that they finally figured out that, despite having Patrick Kane, you're not a team who could compete for the playoffs.
No, Kyle Davidson is he's being bold as a rookie GM. They went into that draft with no first round picks, and they ended up with 3, which was really cool to see. And they took Korchinski, Nazar, and Rinzel. So that was really cool to see. And I do also love the Luke Richardson hire. Mm-hmm. And even though Jonathan Taves, for example, has been very vocal about how he's not happy about the direction of this team, he has said that Richardson has been a really good presence so far with the club here early in training camp, and happy to see him get a shot. And I think he's the perfect guy for this team in that rebuild mode. Also, Lucas Reichel will be a young player to watch out on this team this season. Yeah. All right. Well, that does it. There we go. 1 through 8 for the Central Division. Our division rankings continue next week with the Metropolitan Division. Get ready, Case. We're going to talk about the New Jersey Devils and that new goalie tandem and all of the other teams in the Metro next week. So stay with us for that. Have a great week. Enjoy the preseason hockey, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks so much.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.